The following talk is sponsored by the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. If you're watching the video on YouTube, please take a moment and subscribe to the Academy YouTube channel. You can always access the channel by going to classicalliberarts.com/YouTube. We hope that you enjoy the lesson. God bless. Hello, I'm William Michael of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, and in this video I'd like to talk to students in the Academy about an important issue that I'm certain that they have thought about, especially if they're older and in some more advanced courses, but a subject that will become an increasingly difficult challenge for them to deal with, possibly a temptation for them to deal with as they move forward in their studies in the future, and that's copying content from other sources and using it to complete assignments or answer questions and so on. There's so much available to us today, and it's so convenient and easy for us to access in terms of information and resources that students are tempted to go and grab information. You know, when they're asked a question, it's easy to just go jump on Google, enter that question in and find and scroll through the search results, go to something like ChatGPT and post the question and see the answer that's given, or even go to other students' work or to go to other books and sources and articles and grab information and use it in their own writing assignments and so on. It's very tempting. It's increasingly tempting because it's so easy. It's a matter of copying and pasting that takes seconds. But it's an important academic issue, and I also think it's an important moral issue that students have to learn to think rightly about. Now, if we had a market and we were going to this market to sell let's say vegetables that we had grown, and I was working at my house to improve my soil and plant my seeds and grow my plants and harvest my vegetables, and I collected them all together and loaded up my truck and went to the market, and you were at your house and maybe you didn't work very well or you forgot to plant all the things you wanted to plant and you had a few things to bring with you to the market. We would think it would be pretty rotten of you to sneak over to my truck and grab some of the baskets of vegetables out of my truck and put them on your table for sale. We'd call that stealing, right? And when we're talking about business, when we're talking about buying and selling things and physical possessions that we have, it's pretty easy for us to understand that that's stealing. Right? And it's not only immoral, but in some ways it's criminal, right? At some degree it becomes criminal. Well, the same thing is true with respect to thoughts and ideas. It's the same thing, because let's say we've got two students. One student is told you need to read these pages, study for mastery, learn your lessons, review your memory work, go back and review old lessons, and so on. And one student does that. One student spends hours and hours reading and studying and reviewing and memorizing and writes an email and asks for help with a subject that's hard to understand and gets that help and develops an understanding. And another student doesn't do any of that work. And then it's time for them to go to the market, as it were, and sell their stuff. And one person is very well prepared and deserves a great reward, and the other person is not prepared and does not deserve a reward, and that person is tempted to find other ways to try and get that reward through cheating, right? And in academic circles, this is referred to as plagiarism. And I want to share my screen here because I pulled up the definition of plagiarism and I'd like to share it with you. Let me just open up my screen here so you can see this for a minute. Here we see the definition of plagiarism, okay, in the Oxford English Dictionary. The action or practice of taking someone else's work, idea, etc. So it's not just limited to physical objects, it's taking even someone's ideas. And it says etc., meaning and so on, like words or writings, music, anything that someone else has worked to obtain or produce. Taking that and passing it off as one's own. So you see there's two parts to this. There's two parts to this. Taking someone else's work, taking someone else's idea, that's part one. But the second part is passing it off as your own. That's the second part. And these two actions combine to form what's called plagiarism. Notice here there's another description. It says literary theft. Literary theft. So it can be considered a form of theft, a form of stealing. Now, if we consider the 10 Commandments and we read, "Thou shalt not steal," well, then we can't commit plagiarism. We can't commit plagiarism. It's stealing. And, you know, we can say, oh, but who cares? It's just words, or it's just ideas. If it's the fruit of someone's work, if someone works in ideas and another person works with vegetables, who's to say that we're allowed to steal their ideas just because what? They don't show on a scale or have any physical size? It doesn't make any sense to say it's okay to steal someone's ideas. It's literary theft because people work to obtain their ideas. They go through experiences to gain their ideas. They study and memorize and ask questions. They sacrifice time to gain certain ideas. And it's not just to just take them and we have to remember there's two parts to this, and pass them off as your own. So we see that that is a dishonest and sinful activity, and it's referred to as plagiarism. So you know what this word plagiarism means. It means stealing other people's ideas, work, words, answers, music, whatever, and passing it off as your own. And the reason you're passing it off as your own is because you know that it's worthy of some benefit, and you want to obtain that benefit which belongs to the person whose it is. So that's what's wrong about plagiarism. It's just like stealing any physical thing. Okay, it's a form of theft. But it's important to note that there's two parts to plagiarism, because taking someone else's work, taking someone else's idea, taking someone else's words, etc., is not necessarily plagiarism. And it's not necessarily wrong. In fact, it's very common and sometimes is necessary in the work that we do. What's wrong is passing it off as our own, or trying to pass it off as our own. So in academic work that we do, we all recognize that sometimes we need to borrow someone else's work, we need to borrow someone else's ideas, or it's good for us for some reason to borrow someone else's words, but we don't pass them off as our own. We provide a citation that tells our readers or our listeners, whoever is using our work, tells us where those ideas, where those words came from, where we got them from, and gives credit to the source, which is just, right? We give credit to the source. So taking someone else's ideas, there's nothing wrong with that, unless we try to pass them off as our own. Unless, of course, the person has said that no one may share their ideas, right? That's something different. If I publish a book and I say nothing in this book may be copied or shared without written permission, then that's that. And quoting it and giving credit is still not permitted, because the author said, no, I don't want anyone copying or quoting this without my permission. That's that author's right. So we have to respect the rights of the author. And again, this is just a matter of practicing the golden rule. If we did that work and we developed those ideas or wrote those words, we wouldn't want someone else to just take them and use them as they please. So it's, again, it's the golden rule. This is really central to the Christian life applied to academic work or literary work. So this is very important not to commit plagiarism. It's a form of theft. Now, as I said, there's nothing wrong with borrowing ideas or words from someone else if you give credit. And there's a proper way to do this. There's a proper way to do this. Now, the reason why you need to follow the instructions or follow the convention for doing this is because if you use someone else's work, not only should you identify the source of those ideas or words, but you should give the reader or hearer the information that they need to go and find them. Okay, so there's not only a need to credit the source, but there's a need to do so in a certain way so the reader or hearer can actually go find that source if they want to. Now, there are a few different ways to do this, and you should learn this before you graduate high school. You're going to learn this in college, but it's really better if you know how to do this before you go to college. It's important for you to learn the rules for how to give credit to a source and practice doing it while you're in high school because you have lots of opportunities to do so. The other reason it's important is because, as I said, you have so many tools available, like online articles and websites, online dictionaries, online encyclopedias, chat GPT, books, magazines, resources, YouTube videos. It just goes on. Even social media posts, even private discussions and interviews. All of these things can be used as sources, but we've got to make sure that we give credit to the sources and that we do it in the right way so our readers can find those sources, okay? What I'd like to share with you, and again, you see this definition of plagiarism here, okay? And I want you to remember the action of taking someone else's work and passing it off as your own. That's plagiarism. It's literary theft, okay? Certainly can't be justified by the Ten Commandments, certainly can't be justified by the Golden Rule. So it's something that Christians have to learn not to do, all right? Now, before I go any further, let me just say this. If you do your studies on your own, if you do the work of study, if you're instructed in a lesson, study this assignment, study it for mastery, read through it, take notes, ask questions if you need help. If you study on your own and you develop your own thoughts, you communicate things in your own words and so on, you don't need to cite any sources. Now, some students will think that's the hard way to do it. But if you're a good student, I'll argue that that's actually the easy way to do it, because you don't need to bother with all this citing sources and all this stuff, because you can just answer the questions based on your own work and your ideas and your words. You can work them out and just use your own words and thoughts. Now, I want to point out that in the life of our Lord, when Jesus was alive, if you read the Gospels, it said that the people marveled when he spoke, because he spoke not like the other religious leaders. He didn't speak the way that they speak or spoke. He spoke with authority, it says. It says he spoke with authority and not as the Pharisees and scribes spoke. And what that means is he didn't cite other sources. He didn't cite other commentators or rabbis or teachers. When he was asked a question, he answered it with his own thoughts and his own words. How many times do we read Jesus say something like, "Verily, verily, I say to you"? Well, there's no need to quote any sources when you're answering, "I say unto you." We read in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said, You may have heard that some have said such and such, but I say to you such and such. That's what it meant for him to speak with authority, not like other men. He answered questions and settled disputes with his own thoughts and his own words. He had no need to quote any sources. Okay? Now, as students, as thinkers, as authors, we can do the same thing. We can answer questions with our own arguments that we think of. We can answer questions with our own experiences that we have witnessed. So we have sources of information that we can use that we don't need to provide any sources for. But sometimes it's necessary to provide sources. I'll give you an example. If you say that, let's say, a certain historical figure like Napoleon in France was born in a certain year, and I don't know Napoleon's birth date off the top of my head. If you want to say that in an essay, you want to say, well, Napoleon was born in such and such a year. How do you know that? You can't possibly know that, right? How would you know that Napoleon was born in a certain year? You probably got that information from some other source. Well, how does he know that that's true, that Napoleon was born in that year? So you see that it's not so simple as to just start throwing around information all over the place. We've got to provide some evidence that something that we say is true. Now, one way we can do that is to simply appeal to another source. So for example, if I know that there's a certain man, certain scholar, who is known by many to be an expert on French history, I can say, Napoleon was born in such and such year, and I know this because, this Dr. such and such who wrote this book on French history gives that year in his book. And I can take from that book the date, I can use it in my own writing, but I'm going to identify the source of where I got that date from. Now, notice there's a benefit for me in doing that, okay? There's a benefit for me in that it makes my writing more credible, because rather than just stating a date and leaving my reader to wonder if that's even true, I can say, this is a date that was given by this expert on French history in this French history book, and I can provide a reference so that the reader could go check it out if he wanted to. But what will normally happen is the reader will give us the benefit of the doubt and say, no, it's probably true. If it came from that book and he cited it, he cited the source here in the essay, it's probably true. So let's just grant that as true. So it lends credibility to your own writing by showing you're willing to provide the sources so your reader can go check your facts for himself or herself. Okay, so there's reason why this is good for us too. But if you say something or you assert something that you can't possibly be the source of, and you learned from some other source, you should get into the habit of giving credit to that source. Okay, so not only is it morally right for you to give credit to your sources, but it's also helpful to your own writing to give sources because it lends credibility to your writing. All right, now, as I said before, there are certain ways to do this. You can't just make up your own, method of citing sources because someone else might not know what that means. Plus, it's very complicated because, let's say, for example, I have this old Greek dictionary that I use. I bought this when I was in college, when I was like 19 years old. It's old, it's beat up, and it was published, let me just see. You can see I got this in 1998. I actually got this dictionary. That was around the time when I was married. But if I go and look, I can see that this book was published, it looks like 1994, okay? So this is an edition of this dictionary that was published in 1994. However, the preface to this is dated 1871. So this is a Greek dictionary that's been around for centuries, and you can probably find it in 20 different editions, plus online versions. It's been put online as an online dictionary. So if I get a definition for a Greek word out of this dictionary, I can't just make up my own method of citing it because there's lots of versions of this dictionary. And the reader, if they're interested in following that source, you know, they would have to know that I got it from this exact edition of the dictionary, or else they wouldn't be able to find it. So because a lot of the books have multiple editions, there's an online version, there's a printed version, there's a hardback, there's a paperback, 2 different publishers publish the same book, on and on and on. We have to learn how to give the exact references to our sources. So as I said, if others want to, they can check our sources and confirm that what we say is actually accurate. Now, in history classes, so let's say we're talking about history subjects, we follow what's called the Chicago method of citing sources. And I just want you to see this. I'm going to recommend a couple books for you to get a hold of if you'd like to study this and learn this. But online, there's a very helpful page. If you search for Chicago Manual of Style Citation Quick Guide, you can see this link here is highlighted. You can see the website is just chicagomanualofstyle.org. So if you go to that website and click on Citation Quick Guide, on one page you've got an overview of all of the most common sources that we use and how you should write the citation when you give credit for a source. Now again, you might think in some casual assignment like an English composition assignment or Aesop's Fables or something simple, you might think, do I really need to do this? And the question you should be asking is, why am I quoting sources at all on a simple assignment? You shouldn't be doing that. So that's the first problem. But if you do pull information from other sources, yes, you do have to give credit. That's why you shouldn't do it. You should answer based on your own study, okay? If you do choose to pull answers from other people's works and other people's books or other web pages, you've got to give proper credit. And this page here, this quick citation guide, Citation Quick Guide it's actually called, gives you an overview of what citations of different kinds should look like when you make them, okay? So all of that information is on there. You see lots of examples, and you're going to have to start learning to do this. You're going to have to start practicing this. And like I said, I think it's a pain in the neck. And that's why when I write, I try to use as few sources as possible. I try to do the work of thinking, developing my own arguments, thinking of my own illustrations and examples and so on to use in my writing because I don't want to do this. It takes much more time to do this. But if you do it, you need to provide credit in the right way. Now, this really isn't very difficult to do. I'm going to show you real quick. This is a paper that I actually wrote last week. And you can see that in this first sentence here, you see this little number 3. That little number 3 marks a footnote. And what it says is, you can see that it's a passage that's been quoted, and I put that little number 3 in there. That's a footnote that tells you that my source for this quote is located at the bottom of the page. And if you see that number 3 and scroll down to the bottom of the page, you can see here the source that I quoted. It was the book that I was reviewing in this paper. So you can see that I've provided the author's name, the title of the book, the publisher and location of the publishing, the date of publication, and the page where that quote came from. Because if I'm going to pull a quote from someone else's work, I need to provide my reader with the source for that quote. So you can see that little number 3 there, which marks that this is the source for that footnote, and you can see that footnote up there in the page. You may wonder, well, what's that other stuff mean? IBID 84, IBID 257. This abbreviation IBID is short for ibidem. It's a short way of saying the quote right here, that's numbered number 4, that footnote comes from the same source. That word ibidem is a Latin word that we use to signify we're using the same source again, so we don't have to write this again and again and again. We write ibidem, it means to look above and you can see the source, and you see that it's from a different page number. And you can see note 5 here is taken from the same source, but page 257. So you can see the way that we give credit to authors needs to follow certain rules, and those rules are found in that Citation Quick Guide, the Chicago Manual of Style. All right, now, you can also get a book like this. This book is actually published for students to use. You see it's a manual for writers, and it gives you instruction on how to write papers, research papers, theses, dissertations, all the kinds of writing that you'll have to do in the future. It explains to you how to do it, and it goes through all of these technical things, how to cite sources, how to do all this kind of stuff. It helps you to understand it. So there are books published. This is one I'd recommend, a manual for writers. You can get this on Amazon. These are easy to get, recommended by just about every college for students. There's another helpful book that I'll recommend. Maybe when you're a junior or senior in high school, you should consider this book. It's a book written by a man named Gordon Harvey. It's titled Writing with Sources. Looks like this. Writing with Sources. This is another great book. If you really want to learn how to think about using sources to actually improve your writing, like I said, it can make your writing more credible, shows you to be more trustworthy. It's a good idea, especially when you study rhetoric and you learn about the importance of ethos or the character of the writer or speaker. It's good to make the first move and say, hey, I'm an honest writer. I give credit to my sources. I don't pretend that any information is mine that's not mine. It's a way of establishing ethos, good ethos in writing. But this book here by Gordon Harvey titled Writing with Sources, a Guide for Students, is recommended. So a couple good sources, but a lot of this stuff is available online. All right, so we've talked about plagiarism. We've looked at the need to credit sources. We've looked at the Chicago method for giving citations or giving credit to sources. And I was showing you a paper that I had recently written and how I had to do this in my own paper. What I want to show you real quick is just how easy this is. Okay, this is, once you get the hang of it, once you understand what you need to do, you're going to find that many websites, many sources already provide for this kind of thing. Okay, so for example, let's say I go to the Oxford English Dictionary. Let's say one of my assignments asks me to find a word in the reading that I'm not familiar with, and it asks me to give the definition. So I jump onto the Oxford English Dictionary, which you can do for free as a Classical Liberal Arts Academy student. If you don't know how, just go on the Help Center on the Academy website, classicalliberarts.com/help, and just search for how to access the Oxford Dictionary, and it will give you the login information. But I go to the Oxford English Dictionary website, which is the best dictionary in the world for English, and I find the word plagiarism that I want to define, get the definition, quote it, and use it in my assignment. But then I should give a reference, right? I should give a citation. Well, look, right here at the top of the page, the Oxford English Dictionary website provides this little link if you want to cite this page. You click on that link, and it already provides you with the citation in proper format according to the Chicago method that I just showed you, and all you've got to do is click Copy to Clipboard, and that's it. Now you go back to your paper, and let's just pretend that I use that definition right here. You just click at the end of that quote. Let's just pretend that the quote is here. You click at the end of that quote, go up here to Insert, click on Footnote, and then down here in the footnote, you just paste, sorry, I have to use Control V. You paste that, and of course you'd need to format it. Let me just format it real quick. Don't get distracted by these details. But you format it, and so there's my citation in my paper using insert, footnote, and then just pasting the citation that I got from the Oxford Dictionary website. So it's not that difficult. Let me get this out of here before I forget. But it's very easy. Just insert, footnote, and paste the citation that you got from the website. Many websites will provide you with a citation. Here's another example. Sorry for the break in the video. I wanted to search for this before I opened it up. Here's another example. We have a popular Catholic website, newadvent.org, where they have a copy of the Catholic Encyclopedia online, which is a useful resource. I wanted to study the 7 liberal arts, so I went to the Catholic Encyclopedia, where they have this great article on the 7 liberal arts. And let's say that I pulled quotes from this for my lesson. I pulled some information from this source. I got a really great line out of it that I wanted to use in a paper. Well, it's not a big deal to cite it, because if I scroll down to the bottom of the page, they help me by providing some citations. Now, this is not necessarily the exact form of the citation that I would want to use if I'm using the Chicago format, but you can see that this website is a good example of one that helps us to provide a citation. So you'll find more and more as you get into this that these sources provide you with help so that you can cite them, because it's in the interest of these sources to have you cite them, because they want that traffic, as it's called. They want people coming to their site when they read something that you've written, see a source provided. They want you to come and follow that to the source, so they're going to help you to do that. Let me show you one more. I'm going to pause this for a second. Here's another source. This is a database called JSTOR that's used in academic work. It's a collection of zillions of scholarly articles and books on all different subjects, where we go to find information when we're researching. But I just want to show you how these websites are often set up to help us provide citations. So let's say I want to search a topic. I want to know about the trivium, right? Let's see if there's any information, articles that have been written on the trivium. So I search for trivium. It's going to give me some results here, 4,300 results, and here's an article on the trivium. And let's say I open this up and study this article, and I pull a quote from it, or I get an idea from it that I use in one of my papers. Well, just look how simple this is. When I click on this article and open it up, first of all, I can read the article right here, so that's very convenient. It'll pop up here and I can read it. Okay, so I can read this, whatever this entry is. This looks like a poem, actually, on the trivium as the topic. If I want to quote from this or refer to this, or if I get some ideas for this and I want to cite it in my paper, look right here. There's a link to cite it. So all I've got to do is click on that link, and it provides me with the citations to use. And all I've got to do is copy it and then go insert a footnote into my paper. It's that simple. So what I want you to see is that once you understand that this work of borrowing other people's ideas, borrowing words that have been said by others, using other sources to get information to use in our own, it's just normal academic work. There's nothing bad about it. Plagiarism is when you use these sources and don't give the credit to the source. That's what plagiarism is. So I wanted to go through this and explain it so that students understand that, once you learn this, it's like you see this whole hidden world of academic activity that you may have never noticed before. You say, oh, so this is what people do. And the answer is, yeah, this is what people do. This is, if I'm writing something, I don't claim to have authoritative knowledge on every topic I write about. I have to go and consult experts on different topics. I grab ideas from other people. I pull words and sentences, even maybe whole paragraphs from other people. But when I do so, I want to make sure I give them credit because they did the work that I made use of. And I want to give them the credit as a sign of respect to them and as a sign of my own honesty, that I'm not trying to pass off some great idea or some great work of research as my own, but I'm giving credit where credit's due, which is just, okay? So you'll see that many sources already provide you with help to do this. because it's in their best interest for you to cite their source and lead people to their resources. But you can also learn by studying this quick guide for how to format sources properly, and that's very helpful if you're not provided with the citation, so you can just copy and paste it. All right, this is another reason why I like to study online with digital text rather than printed books. If I'm studying this book, this is the book that I actually wrote that book review on. This is a 500-page book, and I want to quote something or provide a reference or something like that. What am I going to do? Find the words in the page and type them into my paper? No, I can get an online copy of this book and I can copy the line, paste it, and just be careful to cite my source so I'm not plagiarizing. All right, so that's why I like to use digital books. Excuse me. So there's nothing wrong with borrowing ideas or words from other people as long as you give them credit as the source of those ideas. Now, why am I talking about all this stuff? Why am I getting into all of this? I'll explain it for you. Let me stop sharing my screen here. The reason why I'm talking about this is because I hear teachers complaining every day about kids using online sources, getting information from Google, getting information from ChatGPT, doing a Google search, finding an article online, grabbing information, using it in their assignment, and everybody's upset that the kids are cheating. So what do? They often tell kids, you're not allowed to use Google, you're not allowed to use ChatGPT. We're going to lock this down so you can't access the internet. You're not allowed to use other sources, you're not allowed to talk to your class. Is that really how learning works? That's not how learning works. And we've got all of these tools available to us. What are we going to do now? Punish ourselves and not allow people to use these tools? It really doesn't make any sense. And the problem, in my opinion, is not that kids are cheating. I don't think that's the problem. I think that the problem is that kids are getting information from other sources and they're not giving credit to those sources. That's really the problem. Now, what I do think is when kids learn that they need to cite their sources and give credit to the sources that they get information from, I think they're going to realize that it's really not easier to do it that way. It's not better to do it that way. It really doesn't show your mastery of a lesson. And in grading papers, I think teachers have it very simple where they can say, look, I asked you to read this book. I asked you to give a summary of what you read. I asked you to share your thoughts on this theme or this topic in the book. And instead of giving me your thoughts, which prove that you read it and that you thought about it and that you have some intelligent contribution to make, you just jumped onto Google, looked for other people's answers, pasted them in your work, and then cited sources. That's okay, but that certainly hasn't shown me that you understand this or that you thought through this or that you actually read the assigned reading. And sometimes getting a student to read an assigned reading is more important than just finding out if the student can get the answer. So for teachers, I think as long as students understand that it's okay to get information from other sources. There's nothing intrinsically wrong with that, but you've got to identify those sources. You've got to be honest and say, this is not my work. And if you don't do that, well, then you're committing plagiarism. And that's a moral issue. Now, if you do that in college and get caught, you'll certainly get an F on your assignment, but that's the least of your problems. You could be thrown out of school for doing that. So this activity of plagiarizing is serious business, and students, especially younger students, have to be careful that they don't get themselves into a habit of plagiarizing, of just using the internet, getting information, pulling quotes, copying and pasting, using it in their answers, giving no credit to any sources. You've got to be very careful that you don't develop that as a habit, because then when you go on to college or whatever and you just do that, you can get crushed if you get caught copying something without giving proper credit to the sources. You can get, like I said, you can fail that assignment, which could be a very important assignment. You could be kicked out of that class and get an F in the class. You could be kicked out of the school for plagiarizing. So it's really not a joke. And likewise, in business, if you go into professional writing and you plagiarize something, let's say you say you want to write a story, and you get the idea for your story from another story that you read in a book, and you take that idea and you say, oh, well, that's okay because I'm going to change some of the details. That's plagiarizing. And if you don't give credit to the source, but just present this as your own story, and you don't acknowledge that you got the idea for the story from this other book that was produced by some other writer, you're plagiarizing. This also happens in music. Someone writes a song, some composer comes up with a melody or a tune for a song, and you like that tune, and you get a copy of that tune, get it on your computer, edit it a little bit, change it, and then publish it as your own song. That's plagiarizing, because you took that content from another source, and you likely weren't allowed to do that. And so first of all, you couldn't do that in the first place, but then you did it, gave no credit, passed it off as your own. That's plagiarism, and you can get sued for doing that. All right? One example of this, if you know that I own and run the Classical Catholic radio station, you may look at that radio station and see all of these hundreds of songs and recordings on that station and say, how in the world did Mr. Michael get permission to put all these songs on the Classical Catholic radio station? And that's a good question, but there's a program, the program that actually hosts that radio station is called Live 365. That radio website, that radio hosting service actually has contracts with all of the different music producers, and they pay them licensing fees to use their music, and then I have to pay, I have to do two things actually. I have to pay the radio hosting service to be able to put my station on their website so that I gain the benefit of all of their licensing rights, but then I also have to buy a copy of every song that I use on that website. So every song that you see on Classical Catholic Radio is either is both licensed by that website that hosts the Classical Catholic Radio station, and I also have to buy a copy of the digital copy of that song, the MP3 version. So I can't just go buy a CD, copy it onto my computer, take all the files and slide them onto a website and let people listen to them. That's against the law. That's copyright law infringement. So there are ways we have to learn to do things, because there's nothing wrong with copying someone's ideas, but you have to do it in the right way so that justice is maintained. You give credit to the source, you don't pass something off as your own, and you do everything the right way, and everything's fine. But like I said, as a teacher, I can say, you know what, that's better than nothing, right? If I ask a question, like if I ask what is the main idea of Book 12 in Homer's Iliad, and you choose to hop on Google and just ask Google that question. You ask, what's the theme or main idea of Book 12 of Homer's Iliad? And you go through a couple articles, find a good answer, and then copy that and use it in your assignment. There's really nothing wrong with that, but you've got to credit the source. Okay? You've got to credit the source. That's better than nothing. It's better than just you saying, I don't know, or not submitting any assignment at all. Now, the problem with that is that you really didn't answer my question, which was, after you read Book 12 of Homer's Iliad, what did you find to be the main idea of that book? You see, so you really didn't answer my question. I wanted you to read the book, and I wanted to know what you thought the answer was. Now, students have to understand something. And you can see that this is really a complex topic, and it's very important, and I don't think we talk about it clearly enough. But students have to understand something. If you're a 15-year-old student, now I'm 48 years old. I've been studying classics for 30 years. If you're a 15-year-old student and this is the first time that you've ever studied Homer's Iliad, I know that you don't understand it. I know that you don't understand all the different people that are referred to in the book. I know that you don't understand the different places or the significance of the different places. There's references to mythology and religion that you don't understand. I know that you don't understand those things, and I'm not looking for a 48-year-old's answer to those questions. I'm looking for a 15-year-old's answer to those questions, and you've got to understand that as a student. So when I read a student's answer and I see, yeah, it's kind of stinky, and it doesn't really understand everything, but I can tell by reading that answer that that student read the book. I can tell. An experienced teacher can tell that even if it's not worded perfectly, even if it's not crystal clear, this is the answer of a young student who did the reading and is trying his best to answer the question. An experienced teacher can tell that. And that's what I'm looking for. And when I see that, I give it full credit. Now, what will happen is I'll see a student answer that question, 15-year-old student, and I can tell very, very easily that that student, that 15-year-old student, did not write that answer. And it doesn't matter if he copied it word for word off of a website and pasted it, or if he changed the words around a little bit. I can tell by the quality, by the maturity of that answer that that student did not write that answer. And so what I can do if I want to is I can do a quick search myself and usually find where the student got that answer from, or I can simply give it less points for credit because I know it wasn't the student's answer. So you're not going to trick me. You might be able to trick some teachers, but when it's subjects that I've studied for 30 years and I grade hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of assignments, I know what the lessons contain. I know what student answers normally look like, and you try to copy and paste, there's just no way you're going to get away with that. And you're ultimately cheating yourself because you're not learning when you have the opportunity to learn. You could be asking questions for help, but you're choosing to cheat, and even if you do get one past me, you've only cheated yourself. But it's very rare, and if you have cheated, you probably have been caught. So usually I'm merciful because when you're in your high school years, I think this is something that you have to learn about. You have to learn to not get into this habit. You have to be given time to get caught, to get yelled at, to learn that you can't do that, and then improve after you've been caught. I've had a number of students do that where they were caught one time and that was the last time. And I want that to be the experience. So I'm going to be merciful, but at the same time, it's not going to work. So if you do get information from other sources, you have to credit the sources. You have to. If you do that, like I said, it's better than nothing, right? Better than nothing, but you're not going to get full credit. And if you get caught cheating, I'm just going to give you a 0 on that assignment. I'm not going to throw you out of the class or throw you out of the program because you've got to learn, and I'm happy to help you learn. But you're going to learn the hard way that doesn't work. The best thing to do is just follow the instructions and study so that you can answer with your own ideas, with your own experiences, with your own illustrations, with your own words, because it's always easier to write with your own ideas, your own words, your own illustrations, your own experiences, and so on. If you study English composition, you learn that right from the very beginning of the course. You learn that we always have a source of information because we have our own experiences, our own imagination, and we have knowledge of other things that we've studied or watched or read. So we always have sources of information. We have to learn to use them. And what's really important about this is your unique experiences, your unique thoughts, your unique way of saying things. Like, you know that I have unique ways of saying things. You know that I have unique ways of arguing points, and you get used to that. You know that that's Mr. Michael's style. That's where our style comes from. Our style comes from our own experiences, our own personality, our own background, our own ideas, our own preferences, our own likes and dislikes. That's where your style will actually come from. And if you think about it, it's almost maybe true to say that God gives you your style. And you need to be confident that that style is probably the best style for you as a speaker and a writer. So I would argue against relying on outside sources, especially when you're told to do the study for yourself. But if you feel the need to go and look at other sources for help, if you do take some ideas, if you do take some words even from any other source, you've got to make sure that you're honest about crediting those sources, okay? That's the important lesson that I want students to learn. I think that's the real solution for all of this talk about Google, ChatGPT, artificial intelligence. What are we going to do? It's going to destroy school. No, it's not going to destroy schools. We just have to make sure we all agree to credit our sources and be honest. And if we do that, nobody's cheating. It may not be ideal, but it's honest, and we're not cheating. There's nothing bad going on. We're still learning. Kids are looking up other sources, maybe inferior sources. They may not be developing their own intellectual skills as much as they can, but it's still better than nothing. And I think we need to be realistic about that, because the tools we have are very powerful. They're very useful, and we can't spite ourselves and not use them, be foolish with students and say, no, in our school, no computers, no Google, no online. I mean, we're just spiting ourselves by doing stuff like that. We've got to learn to be honest and to give credit where credit is due and do our best, right? Do our best, and hopefully we can learn to study sources directly for ourselves and answer questions with our own ideas, our own thoughts, arguments, experiences, illustrations, words, and so on. But sometimes we may need to look for some help from other writers, other students even, and we need to make sure we give credit when we do so. All right? So I hope that that's helpful. I know this is a controversial modern issue. I hope that helps to clarify some things for students and parents and teachers. I think this is a way that we can get around this problem without going crazy and reacting to it spitefully, like when teachers used to tell us we couldn't use calculators back in school. They used to say things like, well, you'll never know, you may get caught someplace without a calculator. No, that's not true. We're not caught anywhere without a calculator these days. So learning to use a calculator is an important part of learning to do mathematics, and learning to use these sources online is an important part of learning how to study and think and write and communicate and learn, and we just have to learn to do it in the right way. So I hope that that's helpful. That was a lot of information that I crammed into 53 minutes. If you've got any questions or want to talk about any of these details more specifically, just get in touch with me. I'm going to be helping students with these things in our Friday English live class meetings that are open to all students. So I'll help them to do this practically in their written work. But if you've got any questions on this stuff, let me know, because even as a adult writer and student myself, I'm subject to the same rules. So I not only get frustrated by them at times, but also see the benefit of them in my own writing, because when you want to make an assertion and you present it on your own authority and you're a nobody, it appears weak. But if you present your own opinion and find that some great authority shares your opinion and you can put it in his words based on his authority rather than yours, well, that becomes a source of credibility, which is one of the most important things in writing. So anyway, I hope that that's helpful. If you've got any questions, let me know. God bless your studies. The Classical Liberal Arts Academy works to research, restore, publish, and teach the classical Catholic curriculum enjoyed by wise men and saints throughout history. To join us for classical Catholic studies or to learn more about the programs available, visit classicalliberalarts.com.